Let's face it, most movie critics have zero sense of humor. Comedy movies have gotten a terrible rap through the years, primarily thanks to critics trashing them at every turn. And if you're someone who primarily uses critics' reviews to decide on what to watch, you've missed some all-time classics through the years. This list is full of some of the most iconic comedic writers, directors, and actors of the century. And number one on this list turned out to be one of the biggest and most surprising cult classic comedies of all time. Starting off at number 5, and what's the greatest stoner comedy movie of all time? That would, of course, be Dude, Where's My Car? Written by Philip Stark, who wrote for both South Park and That 70s Show. And the movie follows stoners Jesse and Chester after a long night out where they cannot remember a thing and they get entrenched into a plan to save the universe. Seann William Scott and Ashton Kutcher star as Jesse and Chester. Just two great comedic presences on screen. A phenomenal movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. In fact, it knows exactly what it is and it doesn't try to be anything more than it is. You know, that's a really big strength of this movie, is that it's established early on that this is an absurd universe with absurd people and absurd situations, and it's just an overall really dumb comedy, but it plays into that. It wins as a result of that. And I actually got to sit down with Phil and discuss this movie and his inspirations behind writing it. He told me that this movie was written originally just as a series of sketches, and then the plot came in later. He started with the plan of the "and then" and the "Dude Sweet" sketch, you know, two iconic lines. The plot is actually based on a true story. His friend who lost his car after a long night out drinking, and the adventure that him and Phil went on to try and find the damn thing. And he said they eventually found it like a week or two later, and it was just down the street from the bar. But, you know, it's funny to think of that. There was real life inspiration, that this movie was very loosely based on a true story. And did you really think we'd be done with Seann William Scott? Because coming in at number 4, we've got American Wedding. The movie is the third installation in the American Pie series, and it follows the misadventures of Jim and Michelle on their journey to getting married. And of course, Seann William Scott plays a huge role in this because he is just an agent of chaos, and whenever you throw Steve Stifler into a situation, things are going to get crazy. You know, I like to think of this movie as just one big set piece. I mean, we have a scene towards the beginning where Stifler's reintroduced as the school bus driver, and he comes in and crashes the wedding shower party. We have Jim coming to football practice, where Steve is also apparently a football coach. We have the dance-off, the bachelor party mishap, the list goes on. This movie is just full of set pieces. This is the perfect movie to watch if you just want to turn your brain off and just be thoroughly entertained for an hour and a half. And Seann William Scott has had one hell of a run, and I would be curious, what is your favorite Seann William Scott movie? Let me know in the comments down below.
Polish my nuts and serve me a milkshake.
But getting into number 3, what would you say if I told you that there was a comedy that was directed by the same director as Wedding Crashers, was written by the same writers of The Hangover, and is starring Jason Bateman and Ryan Reynolds, and you never heard of it because critics panned it so hard? Well, that's exactly what you've got in the change-up. We get the R-rated version of Freaky Friday, in which bachelor womanizer and hotshot lawyer family man decide they want each other's life, and they switch bodies the following day because of a curse at a water fountain. This is just another one of those movies that doesn't take it too seriously. I mean, it's a little more well, that's ironic to say because we have just such a fantasy plot line involved, but it's a little bit more grounded than Dude, Where's My Car, at least. And Moore and Jon Lucas's writing is just hilarious. You know, it's honestly humor levels comparable to The Hangover. David Dobkin brings in his genius and magic that he brought over from Wedding Crashers, and of course, you know well by now how funny Jason Bateman and Ryan Reynolds are, and of course, we've got Leslie Mann in the biggest supporting role in the movie, and of course, she's been amazing throughout the years in movies such as The 40-Year-Old Virgin, This Is 40, and Blockers, to name a few. I mean, it is just such a wonderful explosion of comedic genius. You know, it's really a tragedy if you missed out on this movie because critics hated it so much. You know, I told this story in another video. It's actually funny. I think I was wearing the same exact shirt. I remember watching this movie for the first time on a hot summer night during COVID. I did not have air conditioning in my apartment at the time, time. And so I opened up my windows to get a breeze, and I remember I was just laughing, barrel laugh after barrel laugh, just so loud that the neighborhood could hear me. My Wi-Fi might have cut out because, you know, we just had like really shitty Wi-Fi connection at the time. And I remember going to reconnect to the internet, and one of the Wi-Fi connections names was "Who the F is laughing so loud?" That is the best sales pitch I can give for this movie.
Dave has 3 balls. A bouquet of balls. Bad, bad!
But what happens when you give the creator of Family Guy free reign to make the funniest movie possible, and a movie in which he saves all of his best material for? You've got Ted 2, which comes in at number 2. After Ted is declared to be property, we follow Johnny and Ted on their misadventures to get Ted recognized as a citizen and not property by a civil rights attorney named Samantha L. Jackson, who is played by Amanda Seyfried. I would say outside of The Dark Knight, I mean, you can't really argue against The Dark Knight, but outside of The Dark Knight, this is probably the greatest sequel of all time. I know that lovers of The Godfather are going to be coming after me for that take. It takes all of the best elements of the original movie, and it takes out all of the worst elements of the original movie. Seth MacFarlane's comedic genius, paired up with phenomenal acting by Mark Wahlberg and Amanda Seyfried. We just have some of the greatest cameos of all time. Patrick Stewart, David Hasselhoff, Flash Gordon, the Allstate guy, Morgan fucking Freeman. You know, we have Tom Brady fresh off of I don't know how many Super Bowl wins he had at this time, but he was at the peak of his NFL career, and he's in this movie, and he's actually pretty funny, even though he's not an actor. So I remember watching this movie for the first time. I was 16 years old, and we watched it at a theater. I watched it with a couple of my friends. It's just such a great movie, just so much fun.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, but I think what we're probably going to do is just take a seat and get to work.
Trust you completely.
But getting into number 1 on the list, what happens when a bunch of Seinfeld writers get together to write and direct a movie starring a bunch of no-names? You get the comedic road trip masterpiece in EuroTrip. We follow recent graduate Scotty, who accidentally misinterpreted his pen pal as being a man who was hitting on him, who actually is a woman that he finds to be extremely attractive, and after swearing her off and realizing his mistake the next day, he takes it upon himself to journey throughout Europe to try and find her and profess his love for her. You know, this movie is just so funny. It's not just the movie, it's the screenplay too. This is hands down the single funniest screenplay I have ever read. It is just brilliant. For aspiring screenwriters or filmmakers who want to get into comedy, without a doubt, the number 1 screenplay recommendation I would give you is to read the EuroTrip screenplay. And as far as the no-name cast, we have Scott McElwes starring in the role as Scotty, and he landed this role less than a year after he graduated from USC. And we have co-stars in Jacob Pitts and Travis Wester, for whom this was by far their biggest roles to date. And of course, the one name in the movie was Michelle Trachtenberg, who very much rest in peace. I mean, that definitely hit me hard. I think of all of the celebrity deaths throughout the years, hers probably hit me the hardest. Just so shocking, just gone so soon. And I have a poster of her on my wall, or I have a poster of EuroTrip on my wall, and every time I walk by and I see her, I just can't help but think about how gone so soon and what could have been. But this movie would go on to bomb at the box office, as it would only bring in $22.6 million off of a $25 million budget. And then you also have to take in the distribution and or exhibitor fees. So you can realistically cut the number of $22.6 million in half, or by 40%. It's just so unfortunate because they took a lot of the same risks that American Pie took. You know, American Pie was starring a bunch of no-names, and it was written by a first-time screenwriter, first-time director, and it's just sometimes how the cookie crumbles. You know, American Pie absolutely crushed it at the box office and is actually indirectly why this movie even got made. And, you know, that movie went on to be a cultural phenomenon, and all of those actors from the movie went on to have pretty great success. Yeah, I mean, it's just an unfortunate state of the industry and how things go sometimes. But the movie actually would go on to be revived through DVD sales and onto streaming. Definitely one that I see referenced all the time. You know, you still hear Scotty doesn't know. Every once in a while you hear the miscusi. Let's give Scott, Travis, and Jacob the chance to be in another comedic movie. I mean, they definitely deserve it. And if this list has you looking for even more great comedy movies of this era, I actually broke down the greatest PG-13 comedy movies movies of all time. And you're not going to want to miss this list because it's full of some all-time classics that you may have forgotten were rated PG-13, along with several under-the-radar hits. And I break it all down here.